Across Africa, electoral management bodies face a growing challenge of deficits in electoral integrity. The recent edition of the Electoral Integrity Global Report 2019 to 2021 shows that Africa is home to countries with either low or very low electoral integrity. The report highlights political finance regulation as one of the weakest areas of African electoral cycles and calls upon policymakers, candidates, and electoral authorities to improve reporting mechanisms to allow for maximum transparency in the use of money in elections. A cornerstone of ensuring transparency and accountability in political finance is the requirement for political parties and candidates to disclose information about how they raise and append campaign finance. Yet, in many African electoral jurisdictions, the provisions of campaign finance disclosure and reporting are still lacking. Electoral management bodies and political party registrars are charged with the responsibility of promoting political finance transparency through their oversight function. Notwithstanding, majority operate within the context of absence or inadequate formal regulations and weak oversight and enforcement. It is against this background that Alliance for Finance Monitoring, ACFIM, has organized a webinar on promoting political finance transparency, the role of African electoral management bodies and political party registrars.
It's a very good afternoon from this side of the country. We are live in Kampala, Uganda. It's probably an evening somewhere else, and also probably an early morning. But wherever you are watching us from, welcome to yet another webinar series of Money in Politics. It's our 8th edition and happens every last Thursday of the month, and we discuss nothing but money in politics. And in today's edition, we are looking at promoting political finance transparency. What is the role of electoral management bodies and political party registrar? Once again, you're most welcome. You can catch us live. We are live on all our social media platforms. We are live on YouTube at ACFIM Uganda, Facebook ACFIM, Twitter ACFIM, and this show is proudly brought to you by Alliance for Finance Monitoring, Pan-African Political Finance Watchdog. Your and moderator for the next 2 hours is Felix Kafuma, and I'm joined by a panel of four individuals. I'm going to introduce them in a short while. Across Africa, we have someone from Kenya, someone from Uganda, we have someone from Botswana, and also someone from Sierra Leone. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion as we delve deep into the practicalities of how can we promote political finance transparency, looking at their experiences. And this is, once again, proudly brought to you by Alliance for Finance Monitoring. And let's get started by first introducing my panel. And I'm going to start by introducing Florence Biria, who is the Deputy Registrar of Political Parties in the House of the Registrar of Political Parties, ORPP. That is Kenya. Florence has previously worked with the Independent Electoral Commission of Kenya, IEBC, and recently they did go through a very interesting election that to many by and large was a milestone to the democratic process of Kenya, but also many things to learn from as the other parts of the continent, other countries, many things to learn from Kenya, the way they did demonstrate electoral democracy from that end. But he has served at IEBC in a different capacity. She holds the bachelor's degree in commerce, majoring in finance, and has a master's in business administration. She's also a certified public accountant and a member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, ICPAK in Kenya. It's very, very good to have you today joining us, Florence Biria, and you're most welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, the next panelist that I'm introducing is, and I'm so rehearsing this name, Pusetso Morapendi, who is a seasoned governance, peace, and security expert working with Botswana Center for Public Integrity. Botswana is also the host country for the Electoral Commissions Forum of the SADC countries. And it's one of those countries that has done some good work around legislating on money, political party financing, and also a bit of campaign financing. You are most welcome, Morapedi. It's good to have you on set. Okay, our next panelist is Henry Muguzi, who has come in on the last minute, but it's a blessing as well.
Thank you for having us.
Great. Henry Muguzi is standing in for someone who was supposed to be part of this show from the Electoral Commission of Uganda. But it's good that Henry is with us here. Henry is a seasoned expert on political finance and also is an activist, an anti-corruption activist. He's also an observer. He was in Kenya observing the elections, and we should be able to benefit from the wealth of expertise and experience when it comes to this area of political financing. Henry, you're most welcome.
Thank you, Felix, and thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, and let me also introduce in absentia Augustine. I hope Augustine is on set. Augustine, Augustine is on set. He's the electoral manager of the Electoral Commission of Sierra Leone, where he has been working for the last 13 years and still counting. He holds the bachelor's degree with a honors in mass communication from Fura Bay College, University of Sierra Leone, and a master's in peace and development from Njala University, Sierra Leone. Mr. Augustine Koitekaimia, I hope I pronounced this right, Koitekaima.
Yeah, it's Koitekaima.
How do you pronounce this name, Mr. Augustine?
Koitekaima.
Koitekaima. Oh, great. You are most welcome to this edition of the monthly webinar series. It's good to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure. I think today I have to work on rehearsing two names of the people that are joining us on set today. But let's get this off the ground quickly. And I'm going to start with you, Henry, because I need you to kind of like lay foundation for this discussion. I know that you've done a lot of work around political financing. You're an expert in this area, and it would be good that you help us to make sense of this issue of promoting political finance transparency, especially looking at the role of electoral management bodies and political finance registrars, from the perspective that it's in their interest to organize credible elections, but also for them to have what we call credible elections that do not have integrity deficits. They should also interest themselves or ensure that campaign finance is not only regulated, but it's seen to be regulated. And this is where the issue around, or the issues of political finance transparency come into the picture. So what is your experience when it comes to enforcing transparency in financing electoral campaigns in particular, and also when it comes to political parties in general? As an observer, as an expert, what is the experience across Africa as the country, as the continent, sorry?
Thank you, Felix. Let me start like this by stating that the African continent suffers from the challenges of lack of electoral integrity. And one of the reasons why, the factors why that is so, is because we seem to not be succeeding in terms of regulating money. And let me also state that regulating money in electoral processes is necessary for credible and genuine elections, which is why across the world today, the effort is on how do we ensure that there is increased transparency in financing politics and election campaigns. If you look at what's happening where governments have not tended to step forward and be equal to the task, we have seen that electoral management bodies have stepped forward. You will know, Felix, from your experiences, that as we speak, the Association of World Electoral Bodies is focusing on promoting political finance transparency as one of its themes for the past 2 years, and still growing strong. But in Africa, we do not seem to see electoral management bodies stepping forward. And the reason we are talking electoral management bodies in Africa is because in many electoral jurisdictions, it's the electoral management bodies that also double as the political finance regulators, where you have some provisions to regulate political finance, political party financing, and election campaign financing. You get to see that this responsibility has been entrusted with electoral management bodies. But these electoral management bodies seem to have narrowly construed their mandate to mean only conducting and regulating, organizing and conducting elections. The truth must also be told that the role of regulating money in politics is so humongous that some of the electoral management bodies are overstretched. But the times we are living in Africa today, we are also facing extra challenges of gigantic dimensions. For example, in many of our countries, there is concealment in the manner in which money in elections is sourced. I'll tell you, you mentioned earlier that I was one of the observers in Kenya elections. I was there for an extended period. I saw too much money flowing in those elections, and it was mind-boggling where it was coming from. Nobody would tell you for sure that this is the source of it, and that's the danger, because then the suspicions are rife that most of the money that finds its way into financing African elections is actually dirty money. And dirty money thrives where there is darkness. And where there is darkness and concealment, a lot of things happen. Right now, you get to see that many African economies have opened up to cryptocurrencies. Now, these digital currencies, such as crypto and many others, thrive on darkness because they are not regulated by the central banks, and so the manner in which they are regulated remains questionable. But yet, they are a potential avenue for channeling campaign finance, and therefore you get to see that this is a serious issue. You also have a situation where you have African conventions, such as the African Union Convention for Preventing and Curbing Corruption and the African Charter on Democracy, which do not seem to pay sufficient attention to promoting transparency and openness in financing politics and election campaigns. And therefore, because it is in the very interests of the electoral management bodies to ensure that the midwife elections that have integrity, it should equally be the interest of these electoral management bodies to ensure that there is transparency in political financing. When there is transparency in political financing, the people that participate in the elections, the people that observe in elections, will be able to know the sources of this money, will be able to know who finances the political parties they support. It is very disheartening but also improper for a voter to support a political party or candidate for whom they don't know where they are getting the money they are using to campaign. You understand? And so I think the electoral management bodies have every interest to step forward and ensure that there is transparency in this. And transparency also includes reporting that when this money is spent, there is a mechanism that requires and mandates the political parties and candidates that participate in the elections to report on how much they have spent and what they spent this money on. It is also intended to do away with the unwanted practice of using money to induce the decisions of voters. And therefore, I think until Africa has embraced this, we will not see a good progress in the democratization process. And so, which is why it's important that the electoral management bodies pay special attention and take keen interest in this. That's how I can lay the ground, Felix.
Thank you so much, Henry. Indeed, you've laid the ground very well for me to cross to Kenya, where we've just concluded a very interesting process. And Kenya is an interesting country because, one, you've legislated on campaign financing. You've even gone ahead and created a separate body that handles political parties. You've separated the role of electoral management from the role of managing political parties. So there's very good progressive indicators for Kenya. But Florence, from your experience and picking from what Henry has just shared, what is your take? Drawing from exactly, especially from the just concluded elections. First of all, what stopped your office from enforcing the campaign finance law? Because I know there were issues around there. But also, as a follow-up question, what is your experience and what's your take on when we talk about political finance transparency? Your mandate as a regulator, what is your experience in Kenya?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Felix. And good afternoon to all our viewers online in Kenya and across the African continent. Once again, my name is Florence Biria. CPA is a title that I carry as a certified public accountant in Kenya. I serve at the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties as a deputy registrar. I deputize the registrar alongside one more deputy. We are actually two in the office. And first of all, allow me to convey greetings from the registrar. And secondly, allow me to say that today is a very special day in Kenya. We are having the new president, the 5th president of the Republic of Kenya, addressing the nation for the first time since he was elected and sworn in as the 5th president of Kenya, and therefore it's a very special day. I'd really planned to take this time because the presidential address starts at 2:30 Kenyan time. It is now 2:20 p.m., 10 minutes to go. I would have really wanted to follow the proceedings live. I'm a very patriotic Kenyan. Unfortunately, I have to miss that. I have a TV in my office. I'm resisting the temptation of looking the other way where the TV is. That is number one. Number two, as Kenyans, we really appreciate the support that we received from across the continent and also from across the globe during the just concluded general elections, which took place on 9th of August, 2022, and a bit of an extension of the same for the areas where elections did not take place on that day, whereby we had then another set of elections, about 8 or 9 electoral areas having elections on the 29th of August and of the same year. And everything now is concluded, including the presidential petition is concluded and the president is sworn in. And a lot has been happening, including the unveiling of the president's nominees for the cabinet members. Having said that, and appreciating the work that among the many observers and countries of goodwill that came to support us, Of course, you see the competition was very steep, especially the presidential election competition, the gubernatorial election competitions, and the other 4 elective positions, because in a general election in Kenya, we elect 6 elective positions: the president, the governors, the members of National Assembly, the women representatives, the senators, as well as the members of the county assembly. Because in Kenya, we have the devolved system, we have the county government and the national government. I don't want to go into the details of that, but well, we thank God for the successful election that we had in Kenya. I know that some of us are wondering, why am I calling it successful election? Yet we had a petition for the presidential election. We have other petitions that are ongoing, because the presidential election has to be, upon filing, has only 14 days to be concluded. But we also have the other petitions for the elective positions that have a span of about 6 months within which they should be concluded. But we say it was a successful election, and we thank God for it. That even at the end of that petition, everybody has settled down, and the contestants at that level, grudgingly, some of them, because everybody, when you compete to win. There is nobody who competes to fail. So when you fail, definitely it's a disappointment, because that's not the result anybody expects when they are competing. So we expect that a bit of pain, but healing quite fast. And we're happy that there have been no demonstrations in the roads, there have been no damaging of property, there's been no loss of life, and there's been no mobilization of supporters to act against the direction of the government in place. So to us, that is good. Because you know where Kenya has come from. Looking back in the elections of 2007 and up to 2008, the aftermath of that, we've come from a very dark history. So seeing what is happening currently, we can only thank God and build our country. Now, quickly going back to the issue of financing money in politics in Africa, and particularly in Kenya. Financing of campaigns, and also financing of political activities within political parties. I know this is a huge topic to discuss. And somebody was asking, why should there be money in campaigns? Why should there be money in political activities? And my answer would be, there is need for money in every activity. If you must run a successful program of whatever nature, you need money. Yeah, even in our own houses. If you are to keep your living room neat, you need money. Yeah, if you are to educate your children, you need money. And therefore, there is need for money in politics. The question is, how is this money controlled? How is this money managed? How is this money regulated? So that it doesn't become the end in itself, that everybody is pursuing money so that they can win election, that nobody is chasing money so that they can acquire power in terms of forming government in a country, which comes with many other responsibilities, but also with many other privileges and other powers. So talking of political parties in Kenya, we have the separated mandate between the EMB, the Electoral Management Body, that manages and conducts election and the related processes. We also have the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties that basically concentrates on political parties. And this office has a mandate of registering political parties in Kenya, regulating all registered political parties in Kenya, as well as administering the Political Parties Fund. So that's a concept that probably as we continue the discussion, I'll be able to elaborate that in Kenya, we have an established fund in law to support political party activities within the parameters and the criteria given in law. So having said that, it's therefore important to appreciate the distinction in terms of the mandate of the EMB and the ORPP. You'll allow me to use that short form ORPP for Office of the Registrar of Political Parties that I represent in this particular panel. As an office, we have an Act of Parliament that allows us to discharge our mandate and functions which at the same time also prescribes the mandate and the function of the office, and how then we go about registering parties and regulating parties, activities of political parties. Part of the activities includes how political parties manage their finances, because political parties have membership, and in their constitutions, we make them also provide for how they are going to receive financial resources. Political parties are allowed to collect membership fees from their members. They're allowed to receive donations. They're allowed to receive grants, and they're allowed to receive contributions, from within Kenya, financial contribution, donations, as well as grants from within Kenya. Any support coming from outside can only be in the form of technical support, but not direct hard cash. So having said that, therefore, even the management of the sources, or the resources rather, not the sources, but the resources of political parties, again, falls under the purview of the Office of the Registrar, being the regulator in Kenya, the sole regulator of political parties in Kenya. You realize that that mandate is very huge. You will realize it's huge once you separate it from the EMB, because you realize that now, as it stands alone, you start seeing the details that you need to focus on, even as you build institutions in political parties, because that is actually one of the things that we are so keen about, building institutions in political parties, that political parties are not entities owned by a few individuals or just crafted for purposes of an election, but the institutions that have a perpetual lifespan, so that a member will be in the party until they die. For example, I'll give you an example of our second president of the Republic of Kenya, who has since been the longest serving president, Moi, who served for 24 years. He passed on about a year or 2 years ago. He was a life member of KANU. He was the president in the Republic of Kenya for those 24 years as a nominee of a political party called KANU in Kenya. And until today, he died about 1 year plus ago. The political party KANU is still there. And even in the current parliament, both national and county assemblies, we have members elected on KANU ticket. That means the party has outlived. It has lived beyond some of the members, including the president, a former president who was a member of KANU. And that really is what we mean when we say we want to institutionalize political parties, so that a party does not die with the founding member. A party does not die with the senior most elected leader of that particular party when they die or when they leave the party. You will realize that, for example, the president, the current president, is a member of a party called United Democratic Alliance Party of Kenya. Previously, he was a member of Jubilee. So he left Jubilee, he joined UDA, he was elected president, but Jubilee did not die. Jubilee is still there, because Jubilee has been institutionalized, and we have officials elected to run the party. So whether the senior most elected leader is in the party or leaves the party or even dies, does not mean that the party also dies. It exists and goes beyond. Now, quickly coming back, that means that person who is the senior most is not the source of the finances, which therefore facilitate the programs of the party, because the party has its own sources. So if the senior most officer or leader leaves, the party can still continue because they have their own other sources to carry on with their prioritized programs in support of the party ideology. Now, campaign financing. In Kenya, because of the arrangement I've explained, there's a distinction between regulation of political parties and management of election. So campaign and therefore campaign financing is a function and therefore a responsibility that falls under the EMB. That is the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, that is IBC. They're the ones, that is the body that actually enforces the Campaign Financing Act. We know that it's been a challenge for the last several years to have that law enacted, and the attempt to have regulations, as a fast-forward mechanism of implementing some of the critical components that were necessary for the elections, then did not see the light of the day. And towards the tail end of the process, the electioneering period to the election day, did not really see the light of day. But the EMB has its own mechanisms of checking because they require candidates to have bank accounts separate for their campaign activities, which they actually monitor as part of their code. The election, they have the election code. So that code also, in a way, has helped the AMB to kind of monitor and enforce whatever provisions are there in as far as management and control of campaign financing is concerned. Unfortunately, that particular law, that is the Campaign Financing Act, is not within the mandate of ORPP to implement. That is the sole responsibility of the EMB to implement. But coming back to the political parties, because political parties will be there even before the official campaign period. You realize the official campaign period is very short. It's about 2 months to the election date. But way before that, like you saw in Kenya, the campaign activities began as early as last year, before the official campaign period was declared in Kenya. So that means there was use of funds in campaign activities, which the EMB could not manage, could not enforce their provisions because it was outside the official campaign period. That's where ORPP comes in, because those are considered to be the political party activities. And where we are talking of political party activities, then the regulator comes in handy to monitor and ensure that there is compliance with the existing law and including the code. So we have several requirements of a political party that 3 months or 6 months before an election, they must submit a declaration statement of their assets and their liabilities, finance levels, so that we know what was the finance level of a political party 6 months to an election, and therefore what happens to the point at which after the election, again, 90 days after the election, they make another declaration, and therefore now you can be able to reconcile what happened in between, which basically that will be the activities and the financing of those activities that contributed to their election campaigns. So yes, we are almost there as a country, but we're not really there in the absence of that Campaign Financing Act. I know it's been there almost at the tail end, but it has never quite hit the ground. Having said that, I think I want to just contribute or just to interject on 1 or 2 issues that my predecessor, the one who spoke before me, I'm trying to recall his name.
Henry.
Muguzi, Mr. Muguzi, sorry, Mr. Muguzi, I was trying to remember your name. That's not a common name in Kenya. That Africa as a continent suffers electoral integrity challenges, and therefore causing failure to the control of campaign money. And my take is that electoral integrity is a function of many factors, not just money. It's a function of including technology. It's a function including the process that produces even the candidates that come to the fore and therefore becoming the options for the voters to select and make a choice from. I wouldn't want to really ask Africans to beat ourselves that hard. We know we have challenges and weaknesses, but if we say this is a problem of Africa as a continent, we will be adopting a narrative that has been deliberately skewed Yeah, and that would not be very good for ourselves, because we know other continents that we believe are quite developed that have suffered electoral integrity issues, and they have had evidences to that. And therefore, let's say that this is a general election. Electoral integrity is a general issue that needs to be addressed globally, but I don't think it's something that as Africa we want to beat ourselves so hard about. I think it's a global problem in elections, and therefore we need to join hands globally and have this worldwide and have this issue addressed. Because every time we are talking about Africa, we are looking at the ills, but it's time also to look at what we are doing better than the other continents. The other thing that I wanted to touch about is about the money that was circulating a lot, that was noted by the observers in Kenya during the just concluded general election. It's a myth that probably I need to see the report, because we know from the students of economics, we may not be students of economics, but the moment a country prints more money, than the worth of its goods and services, of what it is producing, then there's a problem in that economy, because we know that when there is too much supply of money, then that can even crash the economy, because there will be too much purchasing power by even people who should not ideally be able to afford certain things, and they will be able to afford. I can tell you that the living standards in Kenya did not change that much during the elections, have not changed that much during the elections. Prices had been pushed a little bit up because of issues of supply of goods, including specifically food products and the maize flour in particular, because ugali, which is made from maize flour, is our staple food. And a packet of flour was pushed up from about 150 shillings, Kenya shillings, to about 200 Kenya shillings. And families would actually spend more than one day without a single meal, because that price was too high for them. So if there was too much money in campaigns, how come the common families could not even afford a meal in a day during that time? Because we should have expected them to live luxuriously, and then probably life changes after that. So we've not seen this money, because otherwise central bank will be very busy trying to mop out the excess monies in the economy. We've not seen that. Interest rates are still very low, meaning central bank is not mopping out any excess monies. So where does this money go to that was too much? And they're flooding the campaign environment just a month ago. I've not seen it, and I've not seen anything that can support that narrative. Thank you so much.
Interesting. There's something called local demand. But we shall come back to that debate after, because you can still have a lot of money circulating in an election and the economy is not so much disrupted if there is local demand, and also if the money is being spent, not necessarily overly on consumptive aspects. But that's the debate for another day. I want to bring in here to share your experiences from your country. Exactly when we talk about issues around money in politics, political finance transparency, I know Botswana has a law with some provisions on regulating political financing and also campaign financing. But what's the experience, the law and the practice in that part of the country?
All right, thank you for inviting us. And let me just warn you in advance, I am in Joburg, we have load shedding. So I'm using mobile data and it's a bit unstable. But before I answer your question, let me just maybe speak to what Florence said about money, too much money in the economy or in the country. You can actually have too much money, and I'll give you an example with elections in Botswana in 2019. We could see too much money with how many 3-liter Hiluxes were used for campaigns. We could see too much money with the helicopters that were actually being used for campaigns by political parties. We could see too much money with the buses that were branded with party colors. and the t-shirts that were being given out. So the too much money doesn't mean the economy has got money or people have money, but you can see that there is a movement of money in the cities, in the villages, and you don't know where that movement is coming from. And I think that is why conversations on limitations and campaigns and how much donations parties can get, especially from external of members or external of membership. That's why it is important, because when it comes to too much money circulating during campaigns and during the election phase itself, for the party, it means attainment of power for those that win. But for the citizens, it could also mean one of many things. It could mean the trade-offs that we never know. Because if we don't know where that money is coming from, and we're not at the table that negotiated the donations to a political party or to a candidate, we don't know what the trade-offs are. So for the party, they're getting the money and they're getting the donations in terms of technical support, in terms of those who advise with campaigns, but also those who loan their cars or their buses. We don't know what the deals are. So the parties gain, but in the long run, the citizens may be actually losing one land, because we don't know what the trade-offs are. Mining rights, because we don't know what the trade-offs are. Contracts that are supposed to be done in an open manner, because we don't know what the deals were and how they were made before the party won. In Botswana, to answer to speak to your question, Felix, your statement, yes, the Electoral Act does provide for limitations. It used to be 50,000 pula. 50,000 pula, I think, is about what, maybe $4,500, right? So you can also see, maybe it's because we are a small country we're a big country with a small population. So even the thinking around how much one can spend or how much one can receive in terms of campaign donation, we thought it can never be more than 50,000 pula or $4,500. But because there was so much money, too much money that we saw in terms of what was happening with campaigns, 2019, I think it was December or November, Parliament sat down and they passed an amendment to the Electoral Act where they increased that limit to 2 million pula. So moving from 4.5 USD, right, to close to 200,000 USD, because they realized something. They realized that they actually did something that was a little bit maybe out of the way. But that is what's interesting about political parties when it comes to financing. In this one, as a civil society activist, I will take it back to the citizens. The question is, do citizens care what happens in their political parties? Do citizens pay membership fees? I mean, Moy, for example, can we actually get a receipt of how much he was paying every month or annually as a member of the party, as a live member of the party? I always say, if we don't care about how much and what happens to our parties, if we don't ask for financial reports, if we don't ask for audit reports of our own political parties, then we deserve what we're getting with our national executive committees, how they get money and how they use the money. Because at the center of promoting transparency and accountability is the members of the party themselves. But if the members of the parties don't know or do not care, then we are going to be talking about the lack of electoral integrity, and the lack of accountability, and the lack of transparency in political party financing. Henry spoke earlier about how the AU convention or even the AU charter don't really speak explicitly on the issue. And one can argue and say, but the UNCAC, which is the UN convention, would speak explicitly on the issue. and its different working groups. Because I remember in 2014, there was a working group that was supposed to deal with financing of candidatures and financing of political parties to promote accountability and transparency. And one of the questions that they were asking, that the working group was asking for member states to ask and implement, were restrictions and limits on private contributions. If it's not a member of the party and it's a company, what will be the restriction, the limits? And the MBs, through the Electoral Act, try to meet this provision with the limits, like say $200,000 when it comes to campaigning or donations, right? And the balance between private and public funding, what will be that balance? But if the members of political parties and citizens do not care that there should be a balance, then who's actually going to enforce it? It's not going to be the political parties. It's not going to be the political parties that will eventually be running government because it works for them. Less accountability is less work for them. Allocation of public financial support. When you receive money, normally in civil society, we write a proposal, and there's always a budget line. We know where the money is going. So it's going for conference and this and transport. But with parties, where does the money go? We don't have that because the members of the political parties do not care or do not know that they should care and ask for these things. Spending limits for campaigns. Too much money was seen. It's seen through the branding and the helicopters and the food that's being given to people, the donations, the soup kitchens that now start being mounted. Where is that money coming from? It's coming from somewhere. Most of the time it's not coming from the politicians because most of them aren't that rich. So there is a private person somewhere who's giving that money. But what is the deal? And that is why it's important to look into this. That's why it is important for members of the political parties to say, what are you selling on our behalf? When you receive this money for you to win, what are you saying this person will get or this company will get? So the limits there are necessary. So, and that's where now the EMBs really come in, the independent regulatory mechanisms and sanctions that are needed in case of legal violations. And I love the fact that Kenya actually has a registrar of political parties. It's actually needed because the registrar of societies in Botswana cannot, and I understand why, it would not have, if I may use this word, let me not use that word. It does not have the courage. I'll say that. It doesn't have the courage to go after the political parties, because one of those political parties is actually comprising of a member who is their boss, right? So the president is a member of the party and the minister is a member of the party. Now you're saying a party where your minister or your boss is party of or party to, you must go and ask them to actually give them your books for the year and audit reports. So that does not happen. That does not take place. But I like the fact that, Florence is working for RPP, and they're trying to regulate what happens with political parties. And I always say during civic education, sometimes to joke, but I'm being serious, that political parties misbehave, and they're allowed to misbehave. And then from there, we expect them to behave differently when they run government. When a political party does not account internally, how do we expect them to cultivate a culture of transparency and accountability when they're running government with so much power? So much power. And in our case, the Constitution giving so much power to a sitting president and cabinet, and we expect them to actually be accountable. I don't know how that is possible. So I really do love the RPP in Kenya, and I hope other countries can also look into that and do the same, and really put people that are neutral and impartial, because we tend to put people who are coming from the ruling party, and I hope that is not the case, Ms. Florence, to really ensure that balanced way of looking at what political parties are doing and of enforcing the act and enforcing, making sure that people actually join political parties. And I love how you say building institutions in political parties, because sometimes we forget that these are more like companies that we hire. So how healthy they are. And you are right, they need money to be healthy. So, but where that money is coming from will determine exactly how our democracy, strengthens and how healthy or fit it will be. But if the money is just coming in and going somewhere, will not build, will not institutionalize political parties. And this is happening in most countries, including Botswana, the shining democracy in Africa. So I love that we're having these discussions, and I think it's one topic that civic educators must take up. And as the Botswana Center for Public Integrity, we definitely will take it up. We will be working with the IEC Botswana very soon on civic education. It's one that we'll take up on the importance of citizens actually joining political parties and caring about the parties and what happens in the parties when it comes to funding coming from themselves and funding coming externally. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You raised very important points around issues to do with third-party reporting, sources of donations, who asks the hard questions. Do citizens actually belong to political parties, or political parties are small clubs representing their own interests? Yes, I hope I have Augustine on call, because Augustine, are you there? Because Augustine, as an electoral manager at the Electoral Commission of Sierra Leone, I would want to hear your experiences when it comes to, first of all, enforcing aspects of political finance transparency, how it works out in Sierra Leone. Because I know, Morapedi, you've partly touched the issue of the appointing authority and the autonomy of these entities on how they do exercise their mandate. Sometimes they allow political parties to misbehave, and that they set a precedent because the main party or the party in power is already misbehaving, and no one can point a finger at that party. So very interesting discussions out there. I don't know whether Augustine is on call, but if Augustine is not on call, I'm going to come back to Henry, because Henry has just joined us again. Henry, as I wait for Augustine, the issue around EMBs in Africa today, mainly limiting their understanding or mandate to organizing and conducting elections and paying less attention to the political finance regulation role. Kenya is a good example, but there are very few Kenya-like in Africa. What explains this? Why do we have such a situation? Uganda is culpable to that as well. Why do we have a situation where the function, the roles of PFR are sidelined, and the roles of EMBs are more pronounced in Africa?
Thank you very much, Felix. Of course, happy to be here again. I liked it when Percepcio talked about these political parties. You see, political parties, many Africans don't take them seriously. But you see, those political parties are indeed governments in waiting. So as a government in waiting, it must demonstrate by word and deed that when they get into power, and power, that word power has to be well understood, that when they get into power, they will be able to comply with the principles of accountability, transparency, and that they are democratic themselves, which is not what we are seeing. What we are seeing in political parties is things that you sometimes sit back and question whether they are even political parties, and whether they're just vessels being used by individuals to deliver them to certain political destinations. Now, a political party, when you look around, you see many of them suffer from what people have called big man syndrome. One man founded it, owns it, funds it. It is not clear where they're getting their money. They are conceding everything. You cannot see one of them stepping forward to be counted as an island of integrity. And then you question, do things integrity even matter in the lives of these leaders? And so political parties, I think, is something you can look at. Now, coming back to your question, these electoral management bodies, now I'm sharing the experience of Uganda. Either the fellows that have crafted the laws have limited understanding of the role of organizing and conducting elections, or the electoral management body itself that we have in Uganda does not understand the roles, the additional roles of being a political party regulator. and a political finance regulator, a political party registrar and a political finance regulator, because the EMB in Uganda is shouldering these three roles. These roles are so humongous. No wonder for the longest time what you get to see is that they have a desk that works on political parties and a desk that works on political party financing. You cannot regulate political parties on the basis of a desk. That's a full-time job. So it lacks the men and women, the boots on the ground that will chase these political parties to make sure that they comply with the statutory requirements of submitting annual returns, of submitting audit reports, and that when these reports are submitted, there is an effort to notify the public to come and inspect these. This doesn't happen. As a matter of fact, what's happening here is that those political finance provisions in the Political Party and Organizations Act are not enforced, and because they're not enforced, the political parties simply do not follow them. We have made attempts to request for information, to access information on this, and we have failed as an organization. On the other hand, acting and operating as a political finance regulator is also such a huge task that the Electoral Commission can't deliver on. For example, the Electoral Commission, we have a law in place that enables political parties that have representation in Parliament to benefit from public financing. The money is appropriated in the Ministry of Finance, is disbursed to the Electoral Commission, which in turn sends it to the political parties. The law says this money should be audited and should be managed in accordance with the requirements of public financial management. This does not happen. When the political parties receive this money, they basically go into festive mode. They feast on this money. Nobody knows what they use it for. There are no guidelines as to what expenses are eligible and which expenses are ineligible, and they don't account for it. The Auditor General, who is mandated by law to audit this money, has not audited it. He says this money is enveloped in politics, and therefore it is dangerous money. I don't want to get anywhere near politics. So the political parties have a shroud of darkness, a cloud of darkness, which has facilitated the thieving and the thuggery of this money. They feast on it. When it comes, they share it among the political party leaders. And when you look at the annual budgets of these political parties, you see very small numbers. The numbers that do not, correspond with the volumes they have received in a particular financial, and therefore you question, where is this money going? But because the biggest, culprit is the party in power, the NRM, headed by the president, the Alpha and Omega, the general, they fear to even raise a finger, because if you go for little Democratic Party, they'll say, but why don't you first go with the other one who takes the lion's share? And they don't want to touch it. So there are real issues. So the conclusion is that the electoral management body in Uganda cannot and should not be the body that is interested with the regulating political finance. It should also be that the role of registering and managing political parties gets to be taken away. We have lessons to draw from Kenya. Why don't we have an institution, a separate institution, that regulates and registers political parties, that is able to follow through on some of these political parties, on whether or not they live to the requirements of the ethical principles of a government that is in waiting, or whether and whose interests are they serving? When they go to access this money, who do they access it from? We do know that because Africa is a victim of illicit financial flows, these illicit financial flows have continued to thrive because some of this money from those illicit financial flows comes back to finance politics, and it does so through the political parties. You see a political party behaving as if money is not a problem. A political party flying around in choppers, and as if choppers are like borders around. And then you wonder, where is the money coming from? Who are they accounting for? And the people who are providing this money, what do they expect in return? So when we entrust you with government, what are you going to do? Whose interest are you going to serve? Are you going to serve the interests of your financier, your benefactor, or the interests of us, the electors? And so these are questions I think Africa has to come to terms with. Unfortunately, if you look at our leaders, many of them are just, it's as if they fear this thing. Nobody can step forward and say this has to be done. Countries where they have these provisions, they're not being implemented. The situation we had in Kenya, we have these provisions in many other countries. The issue is enforcement. They cannot enforce them. And then you ask yourself, you who are interested with power, why does it happen that when it comes to enforcing these, you become so powerless? Who has captured you? And so there are many questions you keep asking, you cannot find answers. And so I think we need to come to terms with this, but the electoral management bodies have to step forward. It is in their interest to make sure that they midwife elections that have integrity, and there is no way you're going to midwife an election that has integrity if you're not embracing and promoting the issues of transparency and openness in financing politics. Back to you, Felix.
Thank you so much. Listening to you, you really remind me that I have an activist on set here. But very interesting discussions. You're still watching the monthly webinar series, the 8th edition, and we're discussing the role of African electoral management bodies and political party registrars in promoting political finance transparency. I hope I can have Augustine on set. I'm still waiting for Augustine because having worked for 13 years as an electoral manager in the Electoral Commission, I think there is much we can benefit from that wealth of experience, from the aspects of enforcing political finance accountability and transparency. But let me come to you, Florence. Kenya, it seems to be setting the golden standards here when we talk about promoting political finance transparency, at least when it comes to getting some certain basics right, like separating the EMB role from the political party registrar role. But Henry has just shared and partly mirrored what Posetso also shared, issues around enforcing. Now, let's talk about the enforcement and compliance of political parties in this case, because it's one thing to have the legal frameworks, to have the institution, but the players involved to comply and to enforce. And my understanding is that at least for the IEBC, it's not the president that appoints. So that gives it some level of independence. I don't know what, I think the case of Botswana, I don't know to what extent does the executive arm control the appointments of such bodies. But in Uganda, and that's why Henry was saying so, is that the appointing authority, who is the appointing authority, is the candidate, is the president. So it becomes very difficult to enforce those provisions with a person with so many titles and such power. But let's come to Kenya. What is your experience when it comes to enforcing, for example, the political finance provisions within political parties?
Okay, thank you so much, Felix, and thank you so much, my fellow panelists, for the discussions that are full of insights. And it's always important to engage because you never live the same way you started. Now, let me start with the last bit here, the issue of allegiance. I'll call it that, allegiance, whether to the appointing authority or where is the allegiance, because these institutions are headed by officers who have been appointed by probably a president who is also a member of a political party, if not the party leader of the ruling party. So it's very clear. I can tell you, as I sit here, the deputy registrar, I was appointed by the president of the Republic of Kenya, together with the registrar. And we went through vetting process by parliament. Of course, after going through an interview, a rigorous interview process, And there was a public advertisement, and it's the same thing that happens in most of the commissions and state offices in Kenya, that there is a recruitment process that is undertaken by a recruitment panel, or we have the Kenya Public Service Commission. So the commissioners would therefore conduct the interviews at that level for state officers before they are appointed by the president and vetted by parliament. And of course, you take an oath of office before you start discharging your duties. But immediately you are appointed, because I keep saying this, even if it is the head of state appointing, it is that responsibility and the power given to that office, not the person who sits in that office. Because if there has to be another state officer to be appointed tomorrow, they would not be appointed by Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, the former president. They will be appointed by Dr. Ruto, the current president, because it is the office of it is the presidency that appoints and not the person. And it is therefore just a duty and a responsibility of that office, like the way the office I hold has duties and responsibilities. And once that duty has been discharged, then allegiance changes. You know now there is an act that governs how the office conducts business. And therefore the office holder, in that case, be it their commissioner in the EMB, or in my case, a state officer like myself, therefore having occupied this office, discharges the functions, the duties, the mandate, serves the people of the country in the capacity of the office, because we are only but an office holder. So you stop serving the president. And before I go to the details, a little bit of the details, because you asked about enforcement and compliance, how do we ensure that? Because the two are really correlated, the appointment, and therefore, how do you independently serve the office, given that you are appointed by a party member who now wears a hat of a president, or whichever office has the powers to appoint. That is just the structure. And I wish everybody would look at it that way, because that's how we look at it here. It is just the structure, the operating structure, because somebody has to be appointed, somebody has to be interviewed. But once you've been interviewed, you've been found qualifying, then I cease now begging the Public Service Commission for everything that I want to do. I have to go back to the chairman of the Public Service Commission and saying, boss, you know, you recruited me, you interviewed me, now can I do this, can't I do this? No, there is a law that defines how this office functions, and I start now operating within that law. And if the law has any gaps or any overlaps, there's a process for amending the law. And that process does not include going back to the president and saying, you appointed me, there's a gap in this law, what do I change? Please change it for me and tell me what best serves you. No, that process then goes to parliament. Yeah, and parliament then are the ones that will oversee the amendment of the law to enable each and every office perform and therefore be able to discharge the mandate. Now, having said that, I think I've already clarified that state officers and commissioners are appointed by the president after having gone through a rigorous recruitment process, interview process by either the Public Service Commission or a select interview committee, whichever case applies within the legal instruments that establish the office. Allow me to quickly go back and say, you will realize in Kenya, the president was not supporting the candidate that, the former president was not supporting the candidate that actually became president, the current president. So that element of power, of incumbency, be it in terms of muscles or financial power, I think it's also something that we are overrating. Sometimes we overrate it sometimes, because if it was in terms of resources, yeah, if it was in terms of even using vehicles and what have you, in terms of who can even command who to support which side of the competition, definitely the president came out very clear that he had his candidate of preference. his preferred candidate. And it is not a secret. We all know who his preferred candidate was. He came out clean and said, I am also a Kenyan and I am entitled to a preference. This is my preferred candidate. And actually held their hand and said, this is my preferred candidate. Of course, that was also declaring that I will give them my support. And really, also what I want to say is the citizens have been empowered. At least the citizens of Kenya have been empowered by the Constitution. Article 1 gives sovereign powers to the people. And I am happy that that's what the people of Kenya did. They said, Mr. President, this is your preferred candidate, but we have our preferred candidate. Yeah, you can support your candidate with all the machineries you have, with all the resources you have, even as an individual, as a family, with all your big friends who can contribute and support your candidate. But we have our preferred candidate, and this is secret balloting. And the Kenyans, when they went to vote, they voted. So I actually want to demystify or to actually reduce the overrated, power of incumbency that we always talk about, without directly saying the power of incumbency, but that's what we imply. Having said that, we're saying that political parties sponsor their own candidates because they go into elections for their own selfish interests and reasons, and not the members' interests or reasons. And the question that begs in my mind, and I would want us to really, even as civil societies, let's also look at things realistically, that who is the political party and who is the member? Because it looks like in a political party, we have the people called the political party, and then we have the members on one side, so that the political party, they advance their own interests and their own agenda and their own discourse different from that of the members. But even the candidate who eventually becomes an MP or becomes a governor or a president, they are from the beginning a member of a political party. From the beginning, they must be a member of a political party. And that is very important for this office, that if you are not a member of a political party, like in the just concluded election, if you are not a member of a political party, by the 26th of March 2022, you are disqualified from contesting the election, even if on that party ticket, even if you are given a certificate by the party. It would not be recognized by the EMB, because the EMB would come back to the RPP and ask, you are the custodian of the membership register. Was this candidate a member of this party by 26th of March, which is the cutoff date according to the law? So that one is very clear. Whether somebody had billions of Kenya shillings or dollars or euros or pounds or did not have, whether they had 5 choppers, if you are not a member of that political party by 26th of March, you would not be able to contest on that party ticket. And for us, by the way, nobody came to twist us. It did not happen. There are people who went, gave each other certificates, and somebody went to the EMB. The EMB called us, and we told them, we are sorry. That is a sitting governor, wanted to change parties, and with all the monies, but by this date, they were not a member of that party. The best they can be is to be an independent candidate. And we had quite a number of sitting governors who were hoping to change parties, and they were not able to contest. They had to go and contest as independent candidates. We had sitting MPs, who had hoped to change parties. It did not happen because they were time barred, and the law did not change to favor them because somebody is a governor or somebody is an MP or somebody is a senator. The law applied across the board. You are not a member, you are not a member by this date. The law applies, and therefore the best you can be is to be an independent candidate. So we cannot say, we don't separate members and the party, because members make the party. There is no any other categories. Allow me to talk about governance structures, even as I talk about issues of money. The governance structure is very important, because when you're talking about institutionalizing political parties, then you must strengthen governance structures. For example, in Kenya, as a regulator, we require every political party to have a governing body. And that governing body must be clearly labeled as such. And it must have representatives from all ethnic communities and groupings, the special interest groups, that is women, the youth, persons with disabilities, and the minorities. It must have also a gender, balance, must have women and men within there, and so on and so forth. So it must be a proper mix, even the governing body. When it comes to resolving disputes, you don't have the same governing body making decision on who they're giving a certificate. And if a member has a complaint, they come back there because somebody has given them a lot of money. Yeah. So even if you're given a lot of money as the governing body to issue the certificate to a certain candidate who is wealthy and therefore can bankroll the party's campaigns, if there is a complaint, there is a different body that will deal with the complaints. We call it the Internal Dispute Resolution Committees. And then we have the Political Parties Dispute Tribunal, the PPDT, and definitely all the way. So within the party, we have governance structures, separation of roles, yeah, and different reporting structures so that we have the necessary governance processes being adhered to. So this is very important, and we ensure that, so that you don't have a woman with an issue going before a panel that is made up of men only. You can be so sure you'll not get justice, yeah, because patriarchy issues will come in. So we want to make sure we ensure that as a regulator, every structure within the political party leadership has a mix of the young people, because you cannot have a structure with only old people. The young people, when they come there, they can't get justice. So the young people must be represented, the women, the persons with disability, their voice must be heard. Now, that's where we start demystifying the issues of money, because that's why I was saying integrity is a function of very many aspects. Quickly, allow me to speak to the aspects of enforcement. Yes, when it comes to enforcement, it's very important, because we don't want to be toothless, barking dogs. You only bark, but you cannot bite. The law actually empowers this office to enforce. And some of the enforcement mechanisms we have had in this office is deregistering political parties. Yeah, requiring them to comply. We conduct half-year audits, and where a political party has issues, whether operational or financial, then we give them a notice to make good. And if they don't, the third party is suspended. Because those sanctions are there for enforcement, they are not there to complete pages in the act. They are there because they serve a purpose. So we have actually deregistered, we have suspended. There are about 3 political parties which did not participate in the elections because they had financial squabbles. And therefore we told them, please deal with your issues first before we can allow you to go ahead and compete in the elections. So we have enforced. And now quickly, allow me also to touch on the issue of accountability, as I also deal with the issue of compliance. We have the Political Parties Fund, which is actually 0.3% of the national government resource allocation from the exchequer basket.
How is it
that is not a
distributed?
small amount. So this fund, how it works, because it is provided for in the Act that we use, and we also have regulations for the fund. We have a criteria for distribution within the Act. We have about approximately 10 sections within the Act that speak to the administration of the fund. And as I said, we have a separate regulation that further operationalizes those sections in the Act. Number one, as I said, is about 0.3%. That translates to about 4 billion Kenya shillings allocated every year. We have a criteria. Criteria number one, 70% of that amount is allocated or distributed to political parties proportionately, yeah, with reference to the number of votes garnered by the party in the just concluded general election. Like now, we will use the results of the general election of August 2022 to inform the distribution criteria for the next 5 years until the next general election. So we have 70%, yeah, by reference of the number of votes garnered by political parties. Number two, we have 15%, yeah, by reference of the number of members of the special interest groups that are party sponsored and were actually elected into office in whichever elective position. Number three is generally, if you are a political party and you manage to secure an elective position, even if it is 1 or 2, the number of elective positions you secured in the election, then 10% is allocated to those parties. Now, as a result of that, and of course, if you take 70 plus 15 plus 10, you're not getting 100%, you are getting 95%. So 5% is given to the Office of the Registrar for administration and management of the fund. Because we have to do monitoring, we have to do supervision, we have to provide support systems. We even have to do some of our own spot checks, audit, basic audit. So we have 5%. If you add all that together, you get 100%. So that money, when we have programs for the special interest groups that I've said is the women, the youth, and the persons living with disability. So it actually motivates political parties to sponsor and finance some of these groups which are marginalized both financially and otherwise. So the money belongs to the political party and is given for the purpose, 15% specifically for these groups. And then we have specific purposes for which this money can be used for. So it is given in law. So we have about 5 key purposes for which this money can be used for. Number 1, to promote the interests of the special interest groups. Number 2, to help political parties shape public opinion and policy. Number 3, to promote involvement and participation of the general citizens, yeah, in matters of political activity and political party, the political party. And also for publicity of the political party programs and ideology. So the money given is not given for the party to go back and reward themselves or reward their loyals and loyalists. No, the purpose is given in law, and once a party is given this money, they must submit a work plan. And the Office of the Registrar reviews this work plan to ensure that it meets, it conforms with the purpose given in law. And once they have spent, they must account for this money every quarter of the year before they are given the next quarterly disbursement. So the money is given a period of 5 years, quarterly disbursement. So the account, and the Auditor General, who is the auditor of the public sector, audits these political parties. And they're given an audit report, and they're given an audit certificate. If you get a qualified audit certificate, which means you did not properly spend or account that money for that money, then you are disqualified from getting the next tranche as a political party until you go and rectify the issues raised and deal the issues raised by the Auditor General. So to us, and those are provisions in law, and we are actually enforcing those provisions. So when you talk of enforcement, I've talked about suspension of political parties, deregistration, suspension of financing, yeah, and also there are people that actually have been taken even to court, yeah, if it requires that process, if it has become that bad, that really it has become a criminal offense. Because if we don't do so, and even as I said earlier, that political parties do not get direct cash financing from outside Kenya. They can only get technical support. And that one we are very keen about, and you can be so sure. I know one of the channels through which political parties would get funding was through civil society organizations. So there was this partnership between some parties and civil society organization, whereby a civil society organization will get money and then use that money to support political parties. And we have also tried to enhance the accountability mechanisms, Yeah, so that political parties, you operate on your own. You open a separate bank account for your donations, for your member contributions, and for the money you are getting from the exchequer. And those separate bank accounts, you will submit accountability reports to the Office of the Registrar. Any Kenyan who wishes to peruse those accounts, which have come from all the political parties in Kenya registered by this office, any Kenyan who wishes will just make an application and they'll be given those accounts to peruse. Yeah. So somebody must also express interest. We cannot just take those accounts and put them, at KICC. No. But if you are interested, come make an application. We'll give you those accounts to peruse. And also as an office, once they have also, these accounts have been submitted to us, because there's a dual route of submission of accounts to our office and also to the Auditor General. The Auditor General will go back and audit, but to our office, we will actually publish those accounts in the Kenya Gazette. We will actually publish those accounts in the website of the Office of the Registrar, so that any Kenyan can log in and view and see Party A, if it is Jubilee, they got 2 billion from the fund, and this is how they spent the money. This is the activities where they put the money, including their own contributions and their own collection from other sources. They file returns every year, 3 months after the close of the financial year, and the financial year in Kenya closes on 30th of June. So 3 months after, which is actually the government reporting period and filing of accounts, that is by 30th September, tomorrow. So by 30th of September, tomorrow, all political parties will submit financial reports to this office and to the Office of the Auditor General. All of them, the ones that are fully registered. It's a requirement, whether they're getting the money from the fund or not. And then this office, 3 months later, we will publish those accounts. So there's an avenue for Kenyans to see. And if somebody feels this party is much more money than what they've reported, then they can flag out that. So I think it is important. A lot of countries, and this is my clarion call, a lot of African countries, we believe that there is nothing much to do as Office of the Registrar, but we keep saying that election is a season. But building and supporting political parties to be institutional and very strong institutional, for that case, of democracy, is a process that happens within 5 years. Allow me to say this. This particular election, we had 7 women governors. Yeah, 7. Last time, we only had 3. Unfortunately, 1 passed on and was replaced by a man. This time round, we have 7. Yeah, and all of them were party candidates. So through our regulation of political parties, we appreciate that there has been a lot of improvement in terms of governance, inclusion. We are seeing more women coming to power, taking leadership of county governments. We have the youngest legislator in Kenya being a woman representative who is only 24 years old. Yeah, who is sitting in parliament today. We have a lot of young people, very many young people that are in parliament today below 30 years of age. National parliament, I'm not just talking about the county assemblies, but national parliament, courtesy of the efforts of political parties and the journey we've walked with them as the Office of Registrar of Political Parties.
All right. Thank you so much.
I can see my time has run out. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much, Florence. I need to bring in here Morapedi. Listening to you, I'm like, I think I should apply for citizenship in Kenya, where things seems to be working. But let's cross to Botswana. You've had Florence. Clearly, I think Kenya presents a very good case here. But I want us to speak to issues around how best you can chip in from the experience of Botswana on whether those things happen, the compliance issues and also the enforcement. Whether in Botswana there is something we can learn from as a country, Uganda, but also as other African countries can learn from Botswana. But also, I want to ask you specifically a question around how to improve public access to this information, the political parties, their accounts, when they account, how do they make this information public? They talk about the Gazette for the case of Kenya and also upon request, but how best can this information be made accessible to public so that
Yeah.
they can be able to hold these accountable?
All right. I honestly like what Kenya has done, and Florence, spoke to how the Constitution empowered citizens or empowers citizens. I actually think the civic educators in Kenya has been really, really instrumental in empowering citizens, of course, in accordance with what's enshrined in the Constitution. And that because the citizens know their role, they are in a democracy, participating in choosing who their leaders are, they've taken that role quite seriously. Whilst maybe in our case in Botswana, it's not the issue. It's not how we do things. And someone was saying that other day, actually a lady from Kenya, interestingly enough, from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, was saying that I am too harsh on my government, on Botswana government. Every time I talk about the government, I want for them to do the ideal. And I said, because I'm civil society and I always want government to do the best because I've seen other governments doing the best. So if, for example, I'm going to start comparing Botswana to countries that are doing badly, then it means I want my country to also do badly. So I'll compare my country to the best of the best so that we at least reach, 80% or 75%, if 100% we can't reach. So the empowerment of citizens is critical. And to answer your question, I we're doing some training in one of the rural areas in Botswana, and I asked them, how many of you belong to a political party? And I think I was the only one, maybe a couple of people that I came with, my colleagues were the only ones who raised our hands that we belong to a political party, that were members. And then they were like, oh no, I don't like politics. I don't do politics. I don't do party politics. And I said, that is very sad. It is really sad that you are not a member of an organ that decides how you eat, where you eat, how your children go to school, if at all they will go to school, how you get your health care or not, whether there are roads or not. That is sad. And I can actually literally see a light, a bulb just lighting in most of them, because they couldn't connect really that the political party is such an important institution that has, their lives right here in the palms, right? So it's about empowering citizens to know that you have got to be a member of a party, pay your subscription so that your party survives, especially in our case where the state does not finance political parties. And we've been pushing for the state to finance political parties, and it's not happening. And at this point, it's not happening because of the ruling party, because the ruling party, with our first past the post electoral system, the ruling party has the majority in parliament. So when opposition proposes, even when it's a good bill, because it comes from opposition, it does not get elected for, because it is from the opposition, even when it is good, because the majority in parliament is the ruling party. And we can talk about issues of appointments. I mean, in our case, the secretary of the IEC is appointed by the president, and then the commissioners, one being a judge of the High Court, is appointed by the Judicial Service Commission. But even if there was voting, which we do not have, of candidates, we don't have parliamentary voting, parliamentary questioning of candidates of these statutory bodies or democratic institutions. Even if we had that, the ruling party will still have the upper hand because they have 50+1 in parliament, right? So
Am I losing? Am I losing you? There seems to be a problem with connection. Oh, I've lost Pusetso while she was making a very interesting point.
So is joining us from South Africa, and there is a problem with load shedding.
Oh, okay. I'll bring her back when she gets back. Okay, she's back online. Yes, you're back online.
Hi.
Proceed.
Yes, the power just came back, so there's going to be a little disconnection and connection to the main. Yeah. So the dynamics exist, and I think what I would like to underline, if there's one thing that I'd like to underline, I think what is coming out clearly is the importance of actually political parties and how they are constituted. So it means citizens need to look at the constitutions of their own parties, what is submitted at the Register of Societies in our case, because we don't have register of political parties, what is in the Constitution, because we determine what is in the Constitution. It also means that citizens who belong to parties have to be empowered enough to contribute even when they get to the Congress, because decisions are made at the Congress level. So if you have people that lack confidence in engaging leadership, because sometimes in our case, when you ask, it's regarded as being disrespectful when you ask an elder to account, or when you propose something that an elder might find uncomfortable. You might be regarded as a rogue child or someone who wants to destabilize. And since we love peace so much, as Botswana, we dare not push boundaries. We dare not push the envelope. But I think for the strengthening of our democracy as Botswana, we will have to, as civic educators, really teach people how to push and look at the constitutions of their parties and also be members in good standing by paying their membership so that their parties can do what is necessary, bringing in people to help them with governance structure. You are right. Like, how do we want money to be overseen by members of the National Executive Committee? We don't know, and we dare not even ask, because who dares ask their father what is in his what? Right? So it's just working. I think to really answer your question, Botswana, I can't really say I can give best practice, except maybe our IEC running elections very well every 5 years and trying to do some voting education and registration education, and moving forward, I guess civil society having some space to speak on these issues and not being put in jail. It's a good thing, right? That the space is shrinking, but at least we are not like other countries where people are put in jail. The space is shrinking, but at least politicians don't steal as much as they do in Nigeria. If that's a lesson to learn, I think that is a lesson to learn. But I think actually Kenya has best practices, and we're doing our own constitutional review recently, and I was reading a lot on what Kenya and Zambia were doing in terms of process and how to go about to ensure the integrity of the process. And as civil society, we submitted that to government on how to go about it. Of course, they didn't listen to us. They ignored our recommendations that were actually followed in other African countries and seemed to work. So I'll say, political parties, we need healthy political parties, and they can only be healthy if we have informed citizenry who know their duties, their civic duties and their responsibilities as members of these institutions, who will then ask for audits, who ask for credible financial reports, and ask how money is being used, and also push for state political party funding in our case where there isn't political party funding. So I think to really answer that, thank you.
Thank you so much, Pusetso. So interestingly, I was reading some report, and Botswana is among those countries in Africa considered to be democratic. I think it's called the Democracy Index. Botswana is among the top 4. But listening to you, I'm asking myself, whoever did the survey needs to come and listen to what you're saying.
No, but Felix, so this is the thing though, that we, with the indices, you always look at, do you have Do you have a legal framework? Check. Do you have this? Check. Do you have an institution? Check.
Yes.
But we don't look at the substance of what happens then in the institution. How are the people that are appointed also appointed? What is the integrity of the process? Integrity is in the process. Integrity is not in the having. Integrity is actually in the process of having and in the process of being. Right? So
yeah, you're right. I get what you're saying, and I think Kenya was number 8. Don't ask me which position Uganda was, but I'm glad to have Mr. Augustine. I hope, can you hear me? Because I've been waiting for you for the last almost 2 hours.
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you. And proceeding further, I want to apologize for the bad connectivity that we have at the moment. I keep going offline. That's the reason why you hardly see me. I don't know whether you can hear me clear.
I can
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you straight. I'm going to engage you on this question. I would want to know, and probably not only me, but even the panelists themselves and anybody who is watching us right now, the experiences of Sierra Leone in terms of enforcing political finance transparency, whether being at the helm, working with an EMB, how do you go about it? How do you deal with the issues of enforcement, compliance? Do you even have a law around disclosure and reporting on political party financing, including campaign financing? What is the experience like in Sierra Leone?
Thank you very much for this question and the opportunity that is given to me to bring forward the Sierra Leonean situation. We really don't, I work for the Electoral Commission Sierra Leone, and there is another commission that is responsible for registering political parties, that is called Political Parties Registration Commission. In terms of regulating political parties, that is their own function. In each broader terms, there is a law that is referred to as the Political Party Commissions Act. In that act, they have the powers to monitor and check, probably check the activities of political parties in terms of campaigning, in terms of their finances. But what normally the law prescribes is that it's at the end of every electoral cycle, they have to submit their books of account. And that's where the Political Party Registration Commission comes in to check what they've spent and the sources of this money. But interestingly, the law is in existence, but the enforcement is the problem also. Because if there is a law, but there are no punitive measures set aside, then those that fail to act in that direction will not, there will be no way to punish them. And that's what is lacking. And that's the reason why very recently the Political Party Registration Commission has brought forward some kind of review in that act, and it's currently before Parliament for ratification. So they want to have some kind of aspect of that law that can give them the power to punish those that will fall short of not even submitting their books of account for checking. So that's the situation in my country. They actually have the law, but before this time, this law has been in existence, but it hasn't punitive measures attached to it, and that's the lapse that we sense as a nation. However, you have political parties that comply with, at the end of every electoral cycle, they will make sure their expenditures and every other thing, the sources of their financing, they will submit to the Political Party Registration Commission. And those ones that submit, they will have the commission will check and they will come up with a statement. But others will find it very difficult to submit, and because there are no punitive measures, then the commission will not have power to take some kind of action. And that's the reason why the review has come up of late, and it's now before Parliament. When that act is passed, then there will be now some kind of measure to look at those who break the law and how they will be dealt with regards submitting their books of accounts for some record purpose. So the Sierra Leone situation is like this at the moment. For us, the Electoral Commission is only charged with the responsibility to conduct and organize and conduct all public elections, do voter education, delimit constituency boundaries. So the issue of monitoring political parties' activities with regards to their campaign financing, the sources of their monies, it's not really the work of the Electoral Commission because we do not have that mandate. But what is clear here, for that particular, in Africa in general, for us to have some kind of way of promoting political finance transparency, there has to be strong laws because it's only when you have the legal framework, then people will act. And when the laws are strong, then you have strong institutions also to act in that manner. Then we realize that we will have a way forward in this. But I'm sure, like in my country, Sierra Leone, I'm sure other countries in Africa are also facing these same challenges. There are no strong laws that could be used. And whenever the legal framework does not prescribe certain actions, whatever you do, you cannot take that kind of action because it brings forward some kind of legal implication. And that's the reason why I want to say strongly here that the nations, African nations should be prepared to make sure that there are laws, strong laws, and attached to those laws, punitive measures that could help for Africa to promote political finance transparency. That's basically what I think the Sierra Leone situation is, and we really do not have that kind of strong law that works in that direction. And that's the reason why to even check the excesses of political parties with regards the source of their monies and what have you, we don't, much is not being done because you don't have that kind of strong law that you can use to follow a certain political party for the source of their monies and how these monies are expended. So that's the problem. And in order for Africa, Sierra Leone in particular, to solve a kind of problem like this, there has to be a strong law. Like I said, there is currently the Political Party Registration Commissions has a review of their act that is presently before Parliament, and we only hope when that one is passed, then this thing will be a thing of the past.
Thank you so much, Mr. Augustine. I think it's not a unique situation across Africa where we don't have strong laws. In that area, we really lack something that it should be one of the issues we push at the continental level. Our time is running really pretty fast, and we are having a very interesting conversation. So now in the next couple of 10 minutes, we just bring it down to a close. So every one of you will be having about 2 or 3 minutes to draw your conclusions and give your parting shots. But I want you to speak to 2 things here. One is about, and I'll start with you, Henry, is about why regional associations for EMBs, like the way you have the African Electoral Authorities, the electoral commissions from Forum of SADC and others, haven't really embraced the matter of promoting transparency in political financing. Why they are not gravitating towards that, and also you speak to what is stopping EMBs to embrace digital solutions to reporting on campaign spending and political party spending. Just briefly on those 2.
Thank you very much, Felix. Allow me to first also mention this one, that I've been looking around across the continent and I've discovered a common factor where other relevant bodies such as the inspectorates of government, the directorates of public prosecutions, the financial intelligence units, the asset forfeiture authorities, Uganda Revenue, the revenue authorities. These authorities seem to have neglected the role of policing on illicit and dirty money that flows massively during election campaigns. And they have abandoned all this and left it to the electoral commissions, to the electoral management bodies, which then again signifies much more work for the electoral management bodies. Now, when it comes to these associations, especially the Association of African Electoral Management Electoral Authorities, which sits in Accra, Ghana. I remember at one time I was trying to knock on the doors of Augustine to see how we can establish contact and see how we can get the electoral management bodies together to speak about what solutions can we develop that are grounded with homegrown African solutions to deal or address the lack of transparency in political financing. And you get to see that such a subject has not drawn much interest from the electoral management bodies, and I hope the one of SADC, which is headquartered in Botswana, can pick interest in these things. But the thing is that you look across the world and you get to see that the concern is exactly about that, because the truth must be told that corruption is at levels that are quite sophisticated, and the people know that he who holds political power also holds the key to how corruption can be concealed or protected. And therefore, this is quite interesting. The other thing you asked, Felix, is about then how do we take this forward? Yeah, so I think the time has come also for us citizens of Africa to also get some reasonable pressure to bear on electoral management bodies as public institutions, to understand that as citizens we have concerns, and that these concerns need to be borne into mind, and that they should read into what we think the direction they should take, and that also they shouldn't be too scared of stepping forward and speak to their fellow institutions in their own electoral jurisdictions, especially those that are charged with drafting bills and crafting laws, to see that this matter is given a priority. I think let me leave it there for now, Felix, for my other colleagues to drive it home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Henry. Let me come to let me come to you, Florence, quickly in 2 minutes. How do we move forward, but also speak to the issue of the embracing digital solutions for reporting on campaign spending? I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much. Quickly, the issue of moving forward. In as much as in this country, we have made a lot of progress, allow me to appreciate that. Not because I am trying to blow our own trumpet as a country, but during the elections, as we are having engagement and briefings with observers, I had an opportunity to present on several occasions to the observers. I appreciated that the milestones that we have covered as a country and where we are, and I believe as a country, as a continent also, that we need to join forces more. I see we have the Association of the Global EMBs, the World EMBs. I think it's important to have an association of the continental EMBs, and also whichever name it is given, the bodies that are charged with the mandate of regulating political parties. It's important that we come together and we try to support each other, and better still, we also try to create an impetus to those countries that may not have this kind of entities, so that they can also establish them for their own purposes within their countries, because it's very important to have the separation of roles. The case of Kenya can clearly tell you that the roles are so different that when you combine them, one loses focus, and one suffers at the expense of the embracing of the other. And usually the EMB is given more prominence at the expense of the regulator. And regulation is very important. Quickly, the issue of money in campaigns. Before I look at the issue of legal reforms and regulations, money in campaigns, to me as a regulator where I sit, having gone through elections, having been able to interact with the elections as a member of the EMB team, secretariat, and now where I sit, is the danger is bigger than we are looking at. And I think there is need to do much more and very quickly. Because when you have money coming in to determine and to influence the way citizens vote, yeah, in terms of which party, you end up voting for a party that doesn't even have a proper concrete ideology, And when you're talking of ideology, you're talking of then what is the foundation of the agenda of the manifesto of the ruling party? If really there is no foundation, then you are standing on very dangerous ground. Number two, because this party has money and therefore they can jump around and give money and they win the election, and then what next? Because it's not just winning, it's about providing proper leadership for the country. Number two is about having leaders who are being voted to be legislators, yeah, who have no capacity, who have no idea what legislation is all about, who don't even understand the development agenda of the country. They don't even know what problems need to be fixed. Yeah, they have no idea about leadership. They just come from a family of a background with a lot of money, and then they think that if you have money, you have leadership. And actually, people should bring you their votes because you have money. And this one is very dangerous, because you end up with a country that has very poor laws, because these are the legislators you put in parliament who don't even know what legislation is all about, don't have no idea about formulating proper legislations, laws for the country. And when you talk about the constitutional amendment, they have no idea that you cannot just have a law that is not anchored. So then having said that, coming to the legal reforms, and the legal framework, it is very important. And as I was alluding to that issue of laws, legal framework is very important, and it must start from the Constitution. A lot of the gains we have made in Kenya is because the Constitution amendment that happened in 2010 in Kenya enshrined a lot of these things that we are doing today within the Constitution. A lot of the things we are quoting in the Act actually are primarily found from the Constitution, including the fund. The fund I'm talking about is established within the Constitution. When you talk about political parties, it is found in the Constitution. The office of the registrar is found in the Constitution. So that is my take, that the countries that you want to also enhance democracy, start with a review of the Constitution, because you cannot have a law speaking of any direction that has not been anchored in the Constitution. It will always be challenged by those who want the status quo to remain. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Let me come to you, Puset. So your parting shots and what should we do moving forward?
Yes, and then I will be leaving because I have a 3 p.m. meeting. But in short, I have actually learned a lot today with the case of Kenya, and what Henry also, spoke to, what my colleague Augustine also just spoke to. So for me, it's been enriching. And maybe I am hard on Botswana, but I think this is what happens when you've benefited from good governance, when you've enjoyed the dividends of democracy and good governance. You also want your children to do so. And if we continue the way we are, where we don't strengthen our institutions and we don't make political parties institutions, we will actually lose the dividends of good governance that my children won't find that. And that children will not find that. So I am harsh, definitely, because I know I've seen good and I want better for myself now and for generations to come. And political parties are such important institutions that we have somehow neglected. And maybe the neglect comes from not knowing their importance. And that's where civic education really comes in. And I speak of civic education in Kenya because I know it has taken place. I know of some organizations, a consortium of organizations that actually undertook civic education. And it has worked. And that's why you have conscious voters. Some will vote according to T-shirts given and money given, but most of them are actually citizens. If we are to take the three types of people according to the Greek, I like saying this and highlighting that you have your idiots, your citizens, and your tribesmen. The civic education actually helps create citizens. It reduces the idiots and it reduces the tribesmen when it comes to voting and when it comes to engaging with politics. And I'm saying this to say, for us to really promote transparency and accountability in political financing, that's actually not even about political party finance. It's actually having people who will see it necessary and then put the structures and systems in place to ensure that the money given, money taken is reported on credibly, and that it's used accordingly to enhance democracy and enhance development in pursuit of maintenance of peace and security. Because I think in the long term, that's what we want. We want peaceful countries. We want countries that actually provide for their citizens and give public good for their citizens. Now, the organs that are supposed to help drive that, if we neglect them and actually are afraid of those who lead those organizations, then we really do deserve what we get when it comes to what we get from our political parties. So I hope that, as you talk to your colleagues in governments in Africa, that we actually really push for the Register of Political Parties, Office of the Register of Political Parties. I like that idea, and I hope Botswana can actually, take it up. I know I'm going to be pushing for it. Like, do you know in Kenya they have? And I hope that we, as Africans, that it actually becomes a norm and a principle and a value to want transparency and accountability. That when civil society wants it, it is not regarded as a European thing or a foreign thing, that we are being puppets of Europe. What is an African about transparency? What is an African about accountability? And what is an African about wanting those in our political parties, especially if we want them to do good? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Buset. So thank you for those candid thoughts. Let me come to Augustine as we bring this to a close. You have the last word on this one, Augustine.
Okay. Like I said, we have to have strong laws, and looking at it's not just the registration commission, or maybe the institution that registered political parties should be charged with just that. But there are other institutions, like in my country, we have a financial intelligence unit. That unit monitors monies that comes in, that goes out. These are all institutions. If they are well structured and they work properly, it's easier to track monies we consider dirty money coming into a country. Even the Anti-Corruption Commission too can be effective in setting the rules, or setting a very clear platform for political parties, how they get their money and how those monies are spent. If we have those strong institutions, then we have a way moving forward. Again, there is one thing that is clear here. The reason why sometimes political parties, they go outside the realm to get money, if they countries adopt a system wherein they can provide some specific amount for all registered political parties, it is within that ambit you can now come in to monitor whatever addition that comes in. So that one also is key. If nations can adopt that kind of thing, I think we'll be fine in that direction, and we'll be able to guide the kind of processes we do. Even in our campaigns, you have people, they reduce the voters to mere, they go away from them. After 5 years, they come again, they give them money. But if the individuals, like my colleague was just saying, the individuals themselves have their own reputation and credibility to build around their votes. If for any reason somebody leaves you for quite some time and comes with money, yes, you want money, but again, you got to get money not at the expense of your future for the next 5 years. So it's good for 5 years, as the case may be. So it's good for us to have those strong institutions, and people that serve in those institutions has to be credible as well. Because you can have strong institutions, the individuals that work in those institutions can end up destroying those institutions again. So it's good again to have people with integrity to serve in those strong institutions if we adopt. So basically, that is what I can say.
Thank you so much, Augustine, and that brings me to a close for today's edition of Money in Politics webinar series, the 8th edition. That was Augustine from the electoral manager of the Electoral Commission of Sierra Leone, where he's been working for the last 13 years. Also with me, I had Florence Biria, who is the Deputy Registrar of Political Parties in the Office of Registrar of Political Parties. ORPP in Kenya, who joined us to share with us their experiences Also with me, I had Professor Morapedo, who is the seasoned governance, peace, and security expert working for Botswana Center for Public Integrity. She's the board secretary in that entity, and she also HAFOS. And lastly, I had a finance expert, but also an anti-corruption activist, and also is the executive director of Alliance for Finance Monitoring. Thank you so much for making it for these discussions. The conversations continue on our social media platforms. Till next month, same time, same place. Bye-bye. My name remains Felix Kafuma.
Across Africa, electoral management bodies face a growing challenge of deficits in electoral integrity. The recent edition of the Electoral Integrity Global Report 2019 to 2021 shows that Africa is home to countries with either low or very low electoral integrity. The report highlights political finance regulation as one of the weakest areas of African electoral cycles and calls upon policymakers, candidates, and electoral authorities to improve reporting mechanisms to allow for maximum transparency in the use of money in elections. A cornerstone of ensuring transparency and accountability in political finance is the requirement for political parties and candidates to disclose information about how they raise and append campaign finance. Yet, in many African electoral jurisdictions, the provisions of campaign finance disclosure and reporting are still lacking. Electoral management bodies and political party registrars are charged with the responsibility of promoting political finance transparency through their oversight function. That withstanding, majority operate within the context of absence or inadequate formal regulations and weak oversight and enforcement. It is against this background that Alliance for Finance Monitoring, ACFIM, has organized a webinar on promoting political finance transparency, the role of African electoral management bodies and political party registrars.